Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Wrench Turners podcast, the show that's about improving the life, well-being, and productivity of mechanics everywhere. I'm your host, Mr. Joshua Taylor, and today we have a very special guest. He is a content creator on almost every social media platform. He is a shop owner and motorcycle mechanic, Abel of Abel Motorworks. On today's show, we talk about a whole slew of things, ranging from HD to motorcycles, so on and so forth. We get into some nitty-gritty, like how we transition from push bikes to motorcycle, talking about their mechanic, as you'll see, and succeeding from the inside. Let's get into it. We'll get to that story too, but... And firstly and foremost, I appreciate you giving the time. I really do.
Yeah,
you are the first. You are the first mechanic who is not automotive or automotive HD or fleet. I've had those three. I've had them on a couple of times, but you are the first mechanic who is actually outside of that purview, which is awesome, and also motorcycle, which is also awesome.
Yeah, I was listening to your. I listened to a few of your podcasts now, and the last one I listened to was you were speaking about Triumph motorcycles that you worked on and how you liked working on Triumphs. And I was like, yes, I definitely relate to that. I can understand where you're coming from. So it's quite. It's good to see that you work on a few bits and pieces as well and got a bit of variation in there. It's nice.
Yeah, it was working at the so it's the shop I was working at is a power sports store. So we worked on side by sides, ATVs, snowmobiles, motorcycles, scooters from time to time. But the things, the summertime working on motorcycles. Yeah. So, and describing, and you probably listened to the episode how we were describing the differences in working on certain brands and how much simpler it always seems to be to work on a Triumph.
Yeah. I think they're simple, exposed, everything works correctly. They're just and they unify a lot of bolts, don't they? So you get a lot of very similar bolt patterns, bolt sizes. Yeah, they are very good at that kind of mechanical, user-friendly element of things. It's really good.
You can basically attack most Triumphs with like a 5 or 6 mil Allen, and that's about. You may have to go to an 8. If you're working on the brake caliper bolts and stuff like that, and then it's usually a 17 mil Allen for axles, 24, 27 mil for axle nuts, and that's about that's the extent of it, right? You can pull a rear wheel, chain sprockets off on a Bonneville for other than maybe having to pull the exhaust off on them, but you can pretty much do that with those few tools.
And the good thing is they've refined it over the years. So that early 2000s where they started to bring out their Bonnevilles, the early ones of those, the early iterations, they weren't as good. But you can tell that they have refined it and made them more and more usable as they've gone forward, which is always a nice thing for them to develop as not just, reliability and such. They're developing mechanical usability as well, aren't they? Yeah, and that's quite a nice thing to do. I am a big fan of Triumphs.
I think one of the big differences that I've noticed, and maybe this is Triumph or maybe a more English style of engineering. But when you look at automotive from the big three standpoint, Chrysler, Chevy, Ford, and you look at their iterative processes of development, they make big changes.
Yeah.
And you do mid-model updates, which are fairly large updates. Yeah. But they don't seem to fix a whole lot in those major updates where when you look at Triumph, it's like tiny little pieces like this. We moved this 6 mil this way, and it's infinitely better because we moved it just a little bit.
So by far the biggest example of that, out of anything, is Ferrari versus Porsche. So Ferrari, every few years, they redesign their whole cars. They're amazing, everyone loves what they look like, but they're never the most reliable or usable thing. Whereas you get a Porsche 911, you go back 30 years, every year it looks slightly different, but it's got the same concept, but they just make it a little bit better every year. 30 years down the line, you've got a incredibly reliable, quick car. They've kind of covered all their bases and gone through the development over years rather than just scrapping it all and starting from scratch 5 years later. that's kind of
100%.
the way it should be done. Yeah.
That's it's. Do I have it out? Yes. Yeah. However, I think they let me get on the camera here.
Yeah,
I think they won this here. This is what just about everybody thinks of when they think of Porsche. Like this fundamental design, and it hasn't really changed. But this, on the other hand, when I'm getting the camera in the shot, this right here, this ducktail,
whale
tail, that is what the big old whale tail, and
iconic.
I think of when I think of Porsche. It's iconic. Yeah. And then you do you know Singer?
No.
Never heard of Singer? Oh my goodness, Singer Porsches. Okay, so off camera later on today, when you have when you want to fall down a Porsche rabbit hole, look up
right.
look up Singer Porsche. Okay, so they effectively take bodies like that, and they put all the new bits in it. So if you could imagine the currently, I think it's 480 horsepower flat six that they put in the current, like the GT3.
So they reshell all the new models to make them classics, basically.
Effectively, but they put like all of the switchgear is either from the new car or updated. All of the interior is either from the new car or updated.
Excellent.
All of the powertrain is either from the new car or updated. So if you can imagine a 450 horsepower flat six naturally aspirated new Porsche powertrain in one of those.
Yeah. Excellent.
If you can imagine like
amazing.
the weight that the sensation, the analog feel, but you have like nearly 500 horsepower naturally aspirated flat six noise. Like, yes,
phenomenal.
please.
Yeah.
Yes, please. All right. Let's. Well, some of these folks have no idea who you are because the large proportion of my audience in the places where this seems to get showed the most is mostly automotive and HD. So they don't understand that you're a content creator, motorcycle mechanic, and someone who has a fairly large following. So how do you, Mike, how did you get into this business?
Well, if I start from right at the beginning, I think it's the best way to start. It all started out as I was a push bike mechanic when I was a teenager. So I did work experience in school, like a lot of people did, and then so I did a week. The following weekend, they just asked me to come back, and I ended up working there for 7 years, I think. Most of the time, just a general bicycle mechanic, and it's something that has kind of stayed with me until now. Hence the injury I currently got is still push bike related, and it all started back then 15 years ago, I guess. So that's where it all started out, and it was actually through that job that I ended up getting all my following jobs really. And I think quite a common route most people go is they go down the route of apprenticeships, exactly what I did, and it was actually through a client or a customer of ours at the bike shop that I got that apprenticeship. So that was my tail end, and that was just a general automotive apprenticeship. It was, I'd say, 95% cars, and then we did a few, mainly the owner's friends and his own personal motorcycles, and that's where I really got that kind of fascination and want to work on bikes. And I was riding bikes at the same time myself and racing a little bit, so I really knew I wanted to go down that avenue. But it all started out as just an automotive apprenticeship, really.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's only a few ways that most folks so far have described them getting into, whether it's automotive or more specifically mechanics. Right? It's their first job, their first role, their first manager somehow encouraged them into and staying into the industry, or it was familial, somewhat relationary. Uncles, grandfathers, fathers, they either owned or were mechanics.
Yeah.
Owned businesses, not owned mechanic, but owned the businesses that had mechanics or were mechanics themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's interesting. We all and you started with push bike, and for those of us across the pond, that's mountain bike.
Mountain biking, yeah.
Mountain biking. It's interesting that the subtle differences in vernacular, even in our own industry. So, at the end of the day, when we work on stuff, most of it's got wheels, engine, basic powertrain, stuff you sit in, you drive, so on and so forth.
There's some definite terminology that it takes a few seconds to catch up with what you're actually talking about. But you can work it out usually, can't you? Work out what you're on about. But yeah, that first apprenticeship I got, I was really lucky with the place that I landed on. It was a small place. It was an owner he was almost retirement age, really. He's actually retired this year, but he should have retired 10 years ago, really. So it was a small place. It was just him, one other mechanic, and myself, and it was actually in a building that was an offshoot of his house. So it's basically had a separate workshop in the back of his house, and we worked from there, and it was fantastic. He was a really good mechanic. I still talk to him nowadays, he's great. So it was a really good learning point, and he did everything. I don't know, it was a really good fundamental learning for everything I've done going forward. Everything was super clean, super tidy, everything was done properly. It was a really good place to learn. And that's kind of what set me up well, I guess, for everything I've done thus far, really.
And I think learning, the challenge I think I've come across thus far, and I get to record one of these later today with another mechanic, but he's an apprentice. He's a young apprentice, like just in the trade a year. So we're going to get a little bit of insight from him. But when I talk to young mechanics, trying to remember how my own first year was and what it's like now, there seems to be a divergence from how you and I learned. They're not getting as much one-to-one time with either a mentor or a trainer or a coach or a foreman per se.
Right, okay.
It's a lot more production focused, like get you in, get you working, get you making money.
Right, okay, yeah. That's probably not the best way to learn. You want to be that one-on-one, someone. I don't know you don't want to be watched all the time. You don't want to be, micromanaged. But as a young apprentice, it's some of the best way to learn. You get to learn everything correctly, right from the offset, from day one. It's probably the best way I'd recommend is to try and get in very close with a small organisation that can really, teach you one-on-one rather than, you'll be just one of 20 mechanics or so. Sometimes it's better to be in that smaller environment for the first year. I think that really helped me, to be honest.
And that I think that brings up another dichotomy as well, because the apprentices that seem to be learning the most are working for a larger volumes, at least in automotive. I haven't had the opportunity to speak with anybody in power sports or marine who's working for a large store. They're all small. Yeah. But the larger volume automotive stores who have the capacity, I think more specifically in revenue, that can afford to have someone like a non-production foreman who can spend one-on-one time.
Yes, yeah.
They have the ability more to do it, because it seems like the small business owner, the small shop, doesn't have the capacity of revenue to say, hey, I can spend,
I can
2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't necessarily have that capacity. So that's a really big challenge that maybe because of capitalism, maybe because of the industry in gross profit margins and things of that nature.
Over here, when I did my apprenticeship, they were quite well subsidised. So an apprentice didn't cost you a huge amount of money for the first couple of years. So I know that my boss wasn't that interested in me making him money for the first year, because it didn't cost him a huge amount of money for me to be there. And he told me that first year, he was like, you're not here to make me money. You're here to learn so you can make me money in a few years' time. But he made that pretty clear for the first, and that was, there was no real weight on my shoulders to go and earn him loads of money instantly. I knew I was kind of there to learn, which I guess is what an apprenticeship scheme is about, and what you should
I
really
believe
be doing.
Wholeheartedly, and I think that's where, and I'll get some of the folks in America to check me on this, but I don't believe there's a whole lot of subsidy in America. I believe there is subsidy here in Canada, especially our tuitions. To go to our, let me speak specifically because of the two that I know, for automotive and motorcycle, they are both heavily subsidized by the Canadian government, more specifically the provincial government here in Ontario. So, for example, my recent foray to my level 1 motorcycle school, which is 8 weeks, my tuition was only $400 for 8 weeks of school. So that it's heavily subsidized. Like $400 is basically enough to cover administration fees.
Yep.
That's about it. Everything else is subsidized by the government for the most part.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that has started to tail off a bit in the UK, and from looking into it myself as well, it has
mhm.
definitely tailed off recently, and it's become more expensive to have apprenticeships over here. But it still is, a subsidised thing over here, and they are trying to get placements from people over in the local colleges and such like. So they are still trying to push it, I think.
I think that also stems from the fact that mechanics in the UK are regulated similarly to how we are in Canada. You guys actually have an exam, if I'm not mistaken, to pass
Yeah.
for automotive, for motorcycle, you. I don't recall what is your in Canada we call it truck coach. It's there's diesel and then there's truck coach. So the
Oh,
truck
okay.
coach basically gives you I think it's air brake license in Canada.
Right. Okay.
It's a very small subsect because you get
Yeah.
that when you get your diesel. Is it the
I
same
don't.
broken the same up or is it just one?
I don't know over here. I don't know. I don't know anything about the truck side of it. I don't really get involved with that at all, and don't know anybody in that side of it. Kind of the bigger, heavy automotive they call it over here. But
Hmm.
the smaller stuff, it's all governed under one license or one. They call it like a level 2, or is what you needed minimum. Level 3 was advised, and that was just automotive basically. So it was just
Okay.
all into one. But I don't know about the heavier side of stuff, the truck and plant and such. I don't know not something I've ever been involved with.
And that's interesting because, you know, one of the things I've experienced over the years, even from day one, like walking into the first dealership I walked into, and this might be the fact that it was 20 plus years ago, but the dealership owner at the time, he had bulldozers, he had tractors, he had some big trucks. We had one tech in the shop at the time that had his truck coach license as well as his automotive. So
Okay. Yeah.
occasionally he'd be working on a little bit of everything. Um, so I experienced the heavy truck and the automotive and we camper vans and so on and so forth all the way through. And as I progressed through, I've worked on forklifts, I've worked on motorcycles, I'd never had a license or worked with somebody who had a license to work on boats, but I worked on boats as well. And like I've worked on so many things. Whereas, and that's similar to a lot of my Canadian brothers who work in this industry, around this. It's like they work on trailers, they work on trucks, they work on big trucks, they work on a little bit of everything.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet, when
It
I
helps.
talk to folks, and when I talk to folk, like I talked to another gentleman from the UK. He was similar to your circumstance, where he's only ever worked on one brand for his entire career for 20 plus years
Yeah.
and never experienced anything else. And as soon as it was something outside of that brand, outside of that product, it was like, nope, let them go to that dealer.
Yeah.
Is that how the UK is as a whole? That seems to be more of the case.
Yeah, you definitely get more motorcycle specific, car specific, or light van, and then you get the heavier workshops, and they are very much split up. I think it's purely, just because of the size of a lot of the workshops over here. It's really uncommon to have or especially where I'm from, where it's haven't got huge populations and there's not a massive amount of people. Where I am in the UK, there isn't any big workshops around here. So even main dealers might only have 4 or 5 techs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm probably 2 or 3 hours away from London, which is obviously where you'll have the biggest workshops in the UK. Out where I am, I reckon main dealers will have 3 or 4 techs. I know for a fact at the minute the motorcycle dealerships have got 1 or 2 tech at the minute, and there's 4 main dealers in Norwich, and they've got 1 or 2 technicians. So it's the
Wow.
volume from where I am is quite small. So we haven't got any of those large, big workshops that can accommodate everything. Motorcycles, cars, vans, trucks, lorries. They just all get separated out into their specialised little workshops.
That's very interesting to think about how different that is, because I've just been working in a shop with there's 5 techs now.
Yeah.
We infrequent how the shift work kind of works in because we've got some part-timers per se, but there was 5 of us working pretty constantly, and we're in a tiny town. Like
Yeah,
we're in a
really.
tiny town, and you go now there's no main dealers here in my town, but you go 15 minutes up the road and there's 7.
Right.
And each one of them, I think the smallest shop of those dealers has 8 techs,
Right.
probably the
Okay. Yeah.
smallest one. And the largest one, I think, has about 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And that's still small shop.
Small.
You
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
up the road to slightly 45 minutes away to Barrie, and the larger shops there are 25, 30 techs in the
Yeah.
shop, like
That's big.
busy shops.
Yeah. Really big.
Um,
Really busy. Yeah. I reckon the biggest main dealers or the biggest shops around here, if they're main dealers, have probably got 8, 7 or 8 is probably the biggest around
wow.
here, and that's main dealer. Especially if you go into private side of things, where it's non-main dealer, you're looking way smaller than that. We seem to have quite a lot of very small workshops, but lots of them. So kind of 3, maybe 4 techs, or employees, in fact. So that might be 2 techs and a couple of other staff working there. But yeah, we seem to have really high quantities of small workshops out here.
And perhaps that's a progression of tradition. One of the things,
Possibly. I know that a
one
lot
of
of people, especially my customers, they
mhm.
definitely like a lot of the people that I work for and have worked with in the past. They like to go and talk to the mechanic who's worked on their car. They don't really want to go and talk to a secretary, hand their keys over. It's more of they want to talk to the mechanic. They much prefer a smaller. It's more, I guess it's trustworthy. You can speak to the guy who's working on your car, or they can speak to the person working on your motorcycle. So I think there's a big element in that. And I see that quite regularly over here. People don't want to go into, go and buy a coffee, hand their keys over, wait for their car, and then it just gets delivered around a couple of hours later. They want to go and speak to, the mechanic that's working on their car.
It's an interesting twist because here I think we're moving away from it. And I'm not sure who's pushing it more. Because we get a lot of trendy topics and conversations around customer experience, customer value, customer service, things of that nature. When you talk about having the coffee in the massage chairs in the waiting
Yes.
room, and
Yeah.
the fantastical things like being able the anyone who would wish to have their nails done in the waiting room or have a massage or things like that. Those are topics and conversations that are being had. Who's
Yeah.
pushing that narrative? Is it truly the
Yeah.
consumer that's pushing that narrative, or is that a way for, shall we say, a conglomerate of
Yes.
sorts, of a brand conglomerate saying, hey, how do we show that we're valuing $150, $200 an hour, a labor rate hour?
Yeah.
How do we show that? Well, we'll give all this stuff away for free.
Yeah.
Well, when we talk about customers and their desire to understand, or lack of desire to understand, what's going on with their vehicle, timelines and things like that, they want to be spoken to clearly. They want to know what is going on and communicate well with them.
Yeah.
That doesn't require a massage chair. That doesn't require, chips and pop in the waiting lounge.
Yeah.
That
I think,
more specifically requires the consumer to talk to the mechanic.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to. And I think a lot of people, especially my kind of customers and the people that I deal with quite regularly, they see that as a bit of a facade, a bit of a covering up for, or they want to go and speak to a mechanic. They want to see what's being done to their bike, and they quite like that. And that's definitely a change in direction from the way kind of big dealers are going and all sorts around my area anyway. But that I not from a large place as such, so it might just be the fact that there's not as many people, not as bigger workshops out here that things have just gone that way naturally, really.
I think there's another element too that I think the really intelligent people have kind of found that out. I spoke with, and I'm not sure if you had a chance to listen to, but I spoke with Jim Bernasek a while back, and he brought up something that was really mind thoughtfulness. I'm not even sure how to really describe it. Like, it really made me chew on it and noodle on it. But he's got this phrase and uses it when he was running dealerships, and it's SPM and SPDM. So shop production managers, which is quote unquote foreman, and the SDPM, which is service drive production service drive production manager. Sorry.
Yeah.
The two are completely focused on their specific areas of production. But his mindset was both of those people need to be active or former highly skilled technicians so that they can have conversations with customers eloquently and simply so that they feel like they're talking to their mechanic, so that they understand what's going on, so they don't feel like they're getting the brush off. They don't feel like they're getting a sales pitch from the service drive. They don't feel like they're a number. They feel like they can talk to a mechanic, understand what's going on, and
that is,
be happy with their day.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. So you take your car somewhere, you don't want to just go, yep, it's serviced, all done, here's your keys. You want to know about the car. You want to know the ins and outs of it. You want to know, life of parts, know that it's been checked over correctly, what's going to happen next year, preemptive stuff for next year. I think that speaking to someone who has knowledge is one of the most important parts of getting anything, maintained, serviced is super important.
Which kind of leads us to where, how you transition from that push bike, so to speak, in automotive and transition now into where you are now. And you've got, Abel Motorworks. You are a motorcycle service shop. You have a fairly large following on both Instagram and on YouTube. You put out a whole lot of content on several platforms. That's how I found you. It's very obvious from your forget about the quality of the content for a second, because it's quite high. It's very high. But the really cool thing is how you described your first year, having someone say, you're not here to make me money, you're here to learn so that you can make me money later. That is very evident in your style of work now. So how did you get from there to now?
Well, I knew when I was doing that apprenticeship that I wanted to work on motorcycles. I knew that's where I wanted to go next. So I actually applied for more apprenticeships at all the local dealerships to be a motorcycle mechanic. I didn't get a single one. But I was at college. Yeah, I got turned down for all of them. I didn't even get replied for 90%. So I actually... it's funny because I actually now do quite a lot of work for all of them, but that's another story.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's a bit of a full circle moment.
Karma.
Yeah, it is.
And you notice it's karma?
Yeah, I like it. So a friend of mine was an odd little custom Harley shop. Okay, it was a Brit Chopper Customs. It's still going. I still speak to the owner every now and again. But a friend of mine was who I was at college with, and he was working for a classic car restoration company. So they used to restore classic cars. He was a fabricator basically, and he was working at this custom Harley place on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, just building bike bits really. He was good at machining and welding and such likes, and both me and him ended up jacking in both our apprenticeships, and we went and worked there full time, self-employed. I was a mechanic. He was a fabricator, and the owner of the shop wasn't actually a mechanic or an engineer by trade. He was in tech basically, and he was working away 3 or 4 days a week, and we would basically run the shop by ourselves at the age of, I think we were both 18, 19 at the time. So we had this.
Oh my.
Yeah, we had free run of basically a custom Harley shop. It was, looking back on it now, it was phenomenal, but it was really just in at the deep end. So I was in charge of all the full engine rebuilds from day one almost, in at the deep end. So I learned quite a lot at that time, and also I had to learn the business side of it as well. We were there on our own 4 days a week. We were there on our own, so we had to learn the business side of it pretty quickly, and it surprisingly went all right. It went pretty well. So we did that together for a couple of years. My friend ended up leaving, and it was actually when I was inside that workshop that I started Abel Motorworks from inside. So we knew that we needed a bit more quick turnover of customers. So I asked if I could start doing general mechanical work on, road bikes, sports bikes, motocross bikes. So I was actually racing motocross at the time. So I ended up getting in just general motorcycles for mechanical work, and it got to the point where it was so busy, that part of the business, that I ended up going on my own and carrying it on with my own workshop really. So that's how I transferred over into having my own workshop. It was quite a natural progression, and it was really handy that I was able to open that up from inside someone else's workshop. I was self-employed anyway, so it kind of was quite an easy transition. But it was, you know, I knew quite early on that people weren't going to want to bring their sports bikes, road bikes to a Harley shop that was quite obviously advertised towards, you know, Harley Davidson's customization, that kind of thing. So that's why it tailed to me making my own logos, businesses, all that kind of stuff. And my background and people I knew, it kind of just worked that way. And it got to the point where I was more busy than the Harley place from inside their workshop. So then I ended up getting my own workshop. Yeah, that's how it worked.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
It's really cool how everybody sort of transitions through their careers in time and space, and how things. I would never have thought that was a thing that could be, period, let alone be successful. You're working self-employed inside someone else's shop, working on their bits and pieces inside their shop, but still starting your business from inside that shop, and then growing outside, growing your business bigger than that shop, and then and you still talk to them. It's like it's not. Like I spoke about this earlier in the week. You do not have to. How do I phrase this eloquently to be specific? You do not have to be an asshole. You can be professional and respectful inside somebody else's business and succeed on your own. As long as you are professional and respectful, the sky is pretty much the limit.
So you know, you spoke about your one. You wanted me to give one piece of advice or one tip. That's probably the perfect time to say it right now. My biggest bit of advice, and the thing that shocked me the most when I opened my own workshop, was how nice and how important it was to have really good working relationships with other car mechanics, motorcycle mechanics, and other local companies. Without everybody around me that helped me, that would be MOT tester sending me work that he couldn't do. There's a dyno, a place called Track Electronics, who does electrical work and dyno setups on motorcycles. Without a company like him sending me mechanical work and helping alongside him, and also the place where I actually started my apprenticeship, actually started my workshop inside the Harley place. It's I wouldn't have survived those first 2 years. It was all down to those, you know, those selective people that kept sending me work throughout those few years, and I probably wouldn't have survived the first 2 years if it wasn't for those people. So yeah, it's the most important thing. And even to this day, like, you know, we work together. I do certain things, and anything that I don't do, dyno setups, fabrication, just send it all out to them. And it works brilliantly.
Collaborative efforts, respectful relationships, honest communication, no faff, no malarkey, no shenanigans. Just, hey, I'm full for like 3 weeks and I don't normally do this. Hey, can you help me out? Can you help this customer? And more specifically, that's you helping the customer.
Yeah.
Right? Fundamentally speaking, that's you helping the customer. It's like, I can't do this, or I'm unable to do this right now. Let me find somebody who can take care of you and get you back on the road. These are fundamentals.
And there's so many things that I could do, but there's no point in me doing them because I can't do them as well as somebody 5 minutes down the road. So there's no point in me doing it. So like quick shifter setups on motorbikes. You can bolt a quick shifter onto any motorcycle, put in the pre-programmed settings, send it down the road, it'll be fine. But if you set that up on the dyno and get the select trim settings correctly and the pulse width set correctly, so it actually cuts the engine for the correct amount of time, you can only really do on a dyno is set up far better than what I can do in a workshop. So why would I do that when I can send it 5 minutes down the road and get it done better there? So there's definitely things that I can definitely do here. There's no point in me doing it. I definitely might as well send it somewhere where they can just get a better, you know, they can get a better result. It's not about I'm busy enough. I don't need that work. I can just send them out, which I do quite regularly. So it's quite good to have a lot of people that I can just send work to.
And it's interesting you say that, because in here in Canada, it doesn't happen.
Right.
It really doesn't happen. When folks come in, let me see if I can come up with an example here. The biggest challenge is when you're working at a place that isn't a dealer and you're working at a small shop. The small shops fix, small shops maintain, But as you know, especially on motorcycles, there's maintenance reminders. Without the dealer software, for the most part, you can't reset them. So the
Yeah.
maintenance light stays on. And many dealers, as we've been told by our customers, and as I've learned, fixing motorcycles and being in power sports, many dealers will still charge just to reset the light.
Yeah, because they know
Or,
there's no one else can do it.
or they won't reset the light and refuse to set the light because they didn't do the service.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the relationship there is nearly non-existent these days, at least here.
Right. Okay.
And we've had to cultivate relationships with the individual mechanics, and that's, I think, something that my boss has been trying to do for the last couple of years, trying to cultivate more relationships with more mechanics, because there are those out there. I believe the new Snap-on Power Sports scanner is going to start doing more maintenance reminder resets because they've got access to the proprietary software and they're going to have installed.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. That will make life a whole lot easier for the small shop, the non-dealer mechanic, to be able to.
There is a motorcycle software, like a diagnostic tool, which does 90% of them. It's expensive, but it does 90% called Texa. And it's motorcycle specific. It's even, so for a lot of the Italian brands, that is what they use inside main dealers. So I know MV Augusta use it as their main dealer tool. And there's a few different brands, but yeah, Texa, and you can buy it aftermarket. A lot of money, but it does 95% of most of them.
And is that what you use, or do you send it down the road for them to use it?
No, so I've got a customer, somebody I work with down the road has got one of these machines, a Texa machine. I've definitely been looking at it recently, but I've got quite a few single manufacturer tools which you can also buy. So I can do Triumphs, BMW,
The
Ducati.
pads, right?
Yeah. There's a few single manufacturer tools that I've got. So I've gone down that route, and that's why I haven't jumped over to the all-inclusive system just yet. Just because I don't do the quantity of it that requires it, and I can get by 99% of the time with what I've got.
Okay.
And for those odd occasions, I can't. I just go down the road.
The smaller shops, the smaller dealers are going to have difficulty forking out the large sums of money for an all-inclusive piece of software or piece of kit to be able to do that, because it's very cost prohibitive in some circumstances. And I think we talked about a little bit about this on 10 mil when we were talking about what's happening in EV in terms of Tesla and other brands trying to access the Tesla network. How the adapters are going to work, if it's going to be adaptive, if it's going to be adapter, are they going to use the Tesla plugs? Are they going to use Tesla software? How that's going to work? What's the access to things like that? I talked to Lauren Majai. I talked to Lauren. I'm not going to try and say his last name. I talked to Lauren a little while back at a European branded store where they work on mostly BMWs and Mercedes. That small shop, because they only work really on Mercedes and BMW, they have the proprietary Mercedes and BMW tools.
Yes.
But what's their lease and purchase going to be like in 2 to 3 years' time? What's that monthly bill going to look like? And is the small shop going to be able to afford it? So I think you're kind of in that same ballpark where you're in a small shop, but you work on a lot of different stuff. You work on Triumphs. I've seen you work on Triumphs. I've seen KTM's in there. I've seen a little bit of everything. You work on a little bit of everything, don't you?
Everything, yeah. There's probably not a single brand, apart from Chinese and that kind of thing, I stay very away from. And small CC bikes, don't work on anything under kind of 250s. Yeah, above that, pretty much anything I'll get involved with, as long as it's not, So I had a Ducati in a few weeks ago that I couldn't do because I couldn't do a key learn, because obviously that is a dealer, safety reasons you can't do anything key related outside of the dealer network. So things like that obviously I can't do, but most of the other bits and pieces I can get involved with, which is always good. Another place I worked at while I was setting up my own workshop, and I know you've spoke before in the podcast, you quite like the electrical side of the automotive industry. I worked for an electronic or a diagnostic specialist for about 2 years while I was setting up my workshop, kind of doing mornings or a few bits here and there. He was also, when I started working for him, he was on his own, and he had an apprentice that kind of left, so I kind of helped him out a few mornings and bits and pieces. He was doing a few odd mechanical bits and pieces, but he was a pretty well-known diagnostic specialist who worked for a different company around here who was setting up on his own, and that was brilliant. The knowledge I learned from working for somebody like that was excellent, and all of the tools and everything he had. So he had full dealer capabilities for most manufacturers, Ford, BM, and all that. Full dealer capabilities. So that was quite an eye opening. But yeah, his diagnostic selection was vast, massive. The amount of tooling he had.
I think when you get into the diagnostic portion of mechanic work and you enjoy it,
yeah,
especially if you enjoy it, there is a lot of very expensive tools, like very, very expensive tools that you can get into. Like when you talk about scopes and how expensive they can get because of how much more advanced you can purchase down the rabbit hole of what it's capable of doing and what it's capable of seeing.
So that's what we specialised in doing, really.
Mm-hmm.
That is the oscilloscope work. So most things electrically on the car can be diagnosed with an oscilloscope. It's amazing what you can do, and it was, it was all, it was all kind of that system of systematically working your way through learning and diagnosing things, and that sorted me out massively for my own work, my own workshop. Like the stuff I learned and the systems of diagnosing things and how systems work was a massive learning curve, and it's brilliant, really good.
I liken diagnostic, especially high-level diagnostic work like that, and I liken that, and I give you a physical example for those that are listening. High-level mechanic diagnostic work is the same as high-level diagnostic work in any profession. Mm-hmm. You have an individual who you can have an individual who understands squeaks and rattles for the basic gist, understands that you can look for, loose ball joints, loose tie rod ends, and so on and so forth. And then you have someone who can diagnose indirect noises. I have a squeak in the car when I'm doing 60 kilometers an hour, turning left. They can, for the most part, they get pretty good at doing that, and they're a great diagnostician. And then you get the super high level people who are using like $25,000 oscilloscopes to diagnose things. And I liken this to my own life. So many years ago, many years ago, I dropped down off the back of a bed of a truck. So the tailgate was down. I jumped, so to speak. It's only like 2.5, 3 feet off the ground. And I landed funny on grass. And then I just dropped to the ground. And it hurt a whole lot. It hurt my knee a whole lot. And I didn't know why. It's like 3 feet. It's no big deal. I've done this 1,000 times in my life. But I couldn't stand. And my knee kept giving out. And I didn't understand what happened. My knee just ballooned. Just absolutely ballooned, swollen. And somehow I hobbled back to the car. I drove home. My wife was at chiropractic school at the time. And so on and so forth. All kinds of things happen and go through, check, and da-da-da. And one day, about 2 weeks later, after seeking treatment and trying to figure out, how to get my knee better and blah, 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 blah. So we're in a room full of learning chiropractors. So my wife is at chiropractic school. So there's easily 10 to 12 learning chiropractors and 3 or 4 teachers in the room. And they're all looking at my x-ray. Because they're trying to figure out what's wrong with my knee. Why is my knee not healing, given the circumstances, given what everybody's seen thus far? And an individual walked in the room, and he's a DAC bar. So a DAC bar is an individual who is a chiropractor as well as a X-ray technologist and something else. So they have 3 doctorates.
Yes.
So you can conceptually you can think how extensive their knowledge is. And their ability to
as well.
It's broad. So they know Bones better than just about anybody else. If you think Bones from the TV show, that's probably the level of knowledge they have. So you have these 12 people in this room looking at my x-ray. Okay, and they've all got that dog look on their face, and they don't know what they're looking at. And the question is, I was like, what are you looking at? What are you guys looking at? It's like, we're looking at this x-ray. We're trying to figure out what's wrong with his knee. And he goes, yeah, it's broken, and walks away. And almost in pure synchronization, all 12, so to speak. I watched them all do the dog head tilt to the left. And they all, huh. So I had a microfracture of my tibial plateau.
Right.
And 12 people staring at this x-ray for probably 20 minutes hadn't seen it. And this guy with so much diagnostic knowledge walks in, looks at it for half a second, goes, it's broken, and walks away. That is the level of difference between someone who is trained well and really experienced, and the super elite diagnostician.
Yeah.
So I preach training for a reason. That is why.
Yeah, and that was the level, the guy that I worked for, that's probably the level that he was at. I know he did really well. He used to go and do all the diagnostic competitions throughout the UK. They have timed competitions out here. And I know he done very well in a few of those. And he was always very up to date on all the training programs, so all of the EV training as well. He was, even though I wasn't working for him full time, and he knew very well that I wasn't going to be there forever. He was also willing to put me through my own EV training and everything. Like, he was really up on it. It was brilliant. So yeah, training is definitely a super important part of what we do.
What would you say as a small shop owner, for the length of time that you've been turning wrenches and owning a business and running a business? I'm assuming, as you are still a one-man show, you haven't had apprentices, or if you had, it might be few and far between over the years.
Yeah.
And even given the fact you've worked in small shops with apprentices, what would you say is the most beneficial trait in an apprentice that maybe a service leader could look for when they're trying to hire one?
So the few apprentices that I've worked with and worked for, the ones that obviously everyone's going to say willingness to learn. Like, that's brilliant, that's great. A lot of people out there really want to learn, but the ones that always learned the best were the ones that, or the safe, or learn in the safest manner in terms of mechanically, were the ones that were always willing to ask you a question. So if they were doing something and they weren't quite sure, rather than going ham-fisted and just going at it like a raging bull, trying to fix it, trying to impress you, the ones that are actually, I don't know 100% what I'm going to do, I might as well ask. I'd rather an apprentice ask me 400 questions a day than broke 5 things a day because they didn't know what they were doing. I've had both kind of apprentices I've worked with. I've much preferred working with, and they were definitely safer to go and do things on their own, especially the first year or so. I'd be way more willing to allow somebody to go and learn on their own and go and do a bit of work on their own, unsupervised as such, because I knew that they were going to come and ask me questions if anything, they weren't wrong or they weren't happy with something. It's the ones that think that they can, I'll try and impress somebody, I will go a bit ham-fisted, I will try a bit too hard. They were the ones that almost you don't want to leave on their own, and that definitely hindered their learning because they weren't getting as much hands-on experience. And you need that hands-on experience in the first few years. That's really important.
So I'm going to agree and disagree, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second, because this is the kind of conversation that I like having, because this really gets into where I'm trying to help technicians from a high level and from a low level, and service leaders, because what you've said here, and I'm going to try and relate this to something else. Mechanics who ask you questions, and you'd rather have young apprentices ask you 400 questions in a day to learn, because it's more safer that way, instead of go ham-fisted, as you say, into something. So what I've been discovering over this last couple of years in this journey of mental wellness in the shop floor, apprentice learning, so on and so forth, is that we have 3 fundamental ways that we learn: auditory, tactile, and visual.
Yep.
The apprentices and the apprentices and the mechanics that have come to me for coaching, that I've coached over the last year, I try to get them all to do this learning quiz to see how they learn. And out of the 30 or so that have successfully taken that quiz, 28 of them have been 70% or higher on tactile learning. Mm-hmm. So these same technicians did not do well with me auditorily. They had a very big challenge with me trying to teach them anything like you and I are talking right now. I had to write things
Yeah.
down. I had to do either email or text. They had to read it to understand what it
Yes.
is that they wanted to do. Would you say the apprentices that you've dealt with that would not ask you questions, that would go, as you say, ham-fisted in, would that be an individual that's not able to learn as easily in an auditory sense, so they are less inclined to ask you questions, would you say?
No, not particularly, because a lot of times when I've had somebody who asks you lots of questions, it doesn't mean they want you to, do it for them. They just want to be shown, or they want to be talked through it while they do it. I think people still want to learn hands-on. It's just because they've asked and how do they do it doesn't mean they don't want to do it themselves. They just want a bit of either reassurance or a bit of guidance, rather than I'll do this, you watch me, or anything other way of learning. I still believe that a lot of people still want to do, or the relatively small numbers of people that I've dealt with, they definitely want to do it themselves. It's just a bit of guidance sometimes rather than anything else.
So then perhaps the next step in that, would you believe, based on your experience with those and how they asked you questions and what the result then was, would you say that's from a place of a lack of confidence, so they want the guidance, versus those that are ham-fisted who perhaps exude a level of arrogance that
Yes.
they believe they know better?
Yes, yeah. It's the ones that want to do it right who ask you. They're the ones, rather than the ones that have Not. It's not always arrogance. Sometimes it's a bit of overconfidence. It's not always arrogance. It's sometimes a bit of overconfidence, and just need to take it a bit slower. Like you learn, and you're not trying to do. You're not trying to book 10 hours of labour a day. You're just trying to learn. So I think it's just a bit of both, really.
Awesome. I appreciate that feedback, because there are leaders out there that are having a challenge getting technicians into the bay, and B, they're having a real challenge getting young apprentices in and staying in, because the job isn't easy, right? You know yourself, working for yourself, owning your business, trying to get customers in, trying to keep customers happy, trying to do the job well, trying to do the job with quality, making sure you're doing all the bits and pieces right. One of the things that many mechanics who don't own a shop or run a shop understand is how difficult and how time-consuming customer management is, and then still being able to go, did I tighten that bolt? Did I torque it down? Did I tighten this bolt? Did I torque it down? Did I put that panel on? Did I forget to put the inner sleeve and the rear wheel? Because I remember the wheel fell over, it fell on the side, and the inner sleeve between the bearings fell out. That
And
stuff
they're the things
happens.
that keep you awake at night.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As an individual who's been there and thinks about those things, it happens. So teaching the young apprentices what we want from them, what we expect from them, so that they can succeed, is one of the biggest challenge I see. When we talked about earlier on, the difference between going into a small shop with a one-on-one mentor who's going to teach similar to your circumstance, where you're not going to make me any. I'm not looking for you to make me any money this year. I want you to learn so that you can make me money down the road. Having that same mindset and including conversations like, this is how I expect you as an apprentice to act, to talk, to speak, to communicate to me, to your peers, to your customers, so that you can learn how to do this well, so you can make us money. Those kinds of conversations aren't being had en masse. I know there's some leaders that are doing it. I know that if you were leading a team, you would be doing it because it's how you were taught. But these are the things that we need to communicate to not only the service leaders of our industries, but our apprentices as well. We need them to understand the boundaries, understand the rules, understand expectations clearly.
Yes, yeah. I agree. Yeah, and it's so when I had my first workshop, I'm in my second premises now. When I was in my first workshop, I was at that point where I needed to go out and find apprentices. So I was at that crux point of my work where I could either I had too much work to do by myself, so I needed to get in extra help. And it was, I know you said it's a struggle to find apprentices at the minute and the right ones. I definitely agree with that. I got to that point and I was looking around for a few people. I had quite a few people come in and do kind of a few days with me. And I got to the point with my workshop where I actually decided to go the complete other route, to going down the traditional route of, more work, more employees, getting in more people, more turnover of work. I did a completely different route. I actually ended up building this workshop I'm in right now, which is actually in my garden. It's actually at home. So I built a workshop at home, moved from my workshop with other people helping me out, a bit sporadically. They were helping me out. So I've moved back into a workshop in my home, and I'm now working at home, basically from my front garden on my own. And it's I took a complete left turn at that point because it was so difficult to find good help, and also to get to a point where I would be turning over the right amount of work that I wanted to do. So to justify taking on 2 or 3 more employees, which is what I would have needed to do, is quite a step up in work from where you are with just one person. And I would have had to have taken on work that I didn't necessarily want to take on. But it would have been those older bikes that I didn't want to work on, or smaller CC bikes that I wasn't that happy working on. And I definitely went down the route of going for, more specialist work. I guess more of the modern bikes, sports bikes, that kind of thing, track bikes that I do quite a lot of. I took a complete different avenue than the traditional route of, more work, bigger premises, more people. I went the complete opposite way. I went more smaller, niche, and then just where I am now, working on my own.
I think that being able to have the courage to have that discussion with yourself, to go figure out where your individual boundaries are, is like, this is the kind of work that I want to do. How do I work backwards from this? How do I work on, I don't know the number for you, but how do I work on 5 bikes a week that I want to work on, for people that I want to, for customers that I want to work for, because that's effectively, as a business owner who self-employed, do all the work and do all the business, the customers are who you work for. So what customers do I want to work for? What bikes do I want to work on? And how few can I do it so that I really enjoy the work? And how can I afford to run the business so that it's both a value driven for my customers and pays my mortgage at the same rate? And being able to answer that from a genuine place where I'm happy with the decision I've made, because I'm very happy with the work I do, that takes a lot of courage to say, these are my boundaries. And you've done that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a massive step. It was huge, and it definitely felt like a backward step at the time. When I did that, it was only 2.5 years ago I moved into this workshop, maybe less, 2 years ago. It was definitely felt like a backward step. I'd gone from having my own workshop, my own premises, and I'd gone backwards to somebody working from home, and there was big concerns about. My biggest concern was people not believing I was as professional as I could have been if I was in a bigger workshop. I was worried that people thought I was somebody working out of their shed, that kind of thing. So I do make quite a special effort, I guess, to have a good, nice, clean workshop, good work, that kind of thing. And that's kind of where I started to push the whole social media thing, just to try and show people that I wasn't just somebody working from my garage. I'd done other things and other bits and pieces. I wasn't just working from my personal home, that was half of the reason why I started the whole social media bit, really, all the videos I made.
Proving value.
Yeah, that is the phrase I'm looking for. Yeah, proven value, I guess.
And I think that leads you to me kind of meeting you, seeing your content, and then subsequently reaching out. But I think in my own life, had I been able to have a business out back, and I've got now, I can guarantee A, country, and B, a lot of other things, but my property is a lot bigger than yours. I got a 100, I'm at home too, so I'm 140 frontage, and it's 220 back.
Right, okay, yeah.
So a little bit bigger property than yours, I can guarantee. And I already have
yeah.
How big is your shop?
So mine is, so this is 60 square meters.
So
10 by
60
6.
square,
I can fit
10.
in my workshop. I've got enough room for, I'd say, 2 workbenches, and I can fit about 15 bikes I've had in here before. So it's not
So for
huge. It's downsized from what I had before.
the Imperial Incline, that's roughly 650 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give you another small example. I have a 1,200 square foot shop in my backyard.
Yeah. There you go.
I am not allowed to professionally work out of it.
Yes. Yeah, that was another big part of what I had to go through as well, was getting that agreed for where I am as well.
I've asked. It is explicit. You are
Yes.
not allowed to do. It doesn't matter what mechanic work, whether it's hydraulic, whether it's HD, whether it's motorcycle. It doesn't matter. I am not allowed to have mechanic premises on my property.
Yeah.
And if the answer to that question 6 years ago was yes, I probably would be almost in an identical place that you are right now, because I'd be fixing motorcycles in my shop professionally in my backyard without a second hesitation.
Yeah.
Because I have, so my shop out back is split into two. It's got two 10-foot doors on the front.
Nice. Yeah.
The person who built the property actually built that shop the year I was born in '83, which is kind of cool. So the shop is as old as I am. The house isn't. The house was built 8 years later. It was built in '91. But the shop out back is as old as I am. The left side of the shop is the same size shop as yours, about 650 square feet. It's insulated, and I have a wood stove in it to heat it, as well as a gas furnace if I were to turn it on.
Yeah,
So
excellent.
being able to, if I could, I would work absolutely full time, turning wrenches out of that little shop. It makes me happy to be back there working on stuff. It makes me
It's
very
amazing.
happy.
It's amazing what you can do when you haven't got massive overheads. So,
Correct.
And the decisions you can make on work you take on for interest and for learning is a big part of what I do. I don't have to take on work now purely to earn the money. I take on work because I'm interested in it and I want to learn things. One of the big things I did last year is I went and worked for a race team. So I did a bit of subcontract work for a race team, and it was a mechanic at the time. It was a possibility of becoming an engineer's role this year that didn't happen in the end. But that was, far less money than I could have earned if I was in my workshop. But the learning potential and the things I learned that year were, greater than anything I could have done in my own workshop. So it was worth it for me. It was totally worth it.
I think, as the phrase goes, when you are employed, whether you're employed or you employ yourself, if you are not learning or earning, you shouldn't work there. If you get both, you're in an ideal spot.
Yeah.
But it's learn or earn, and every apprentice should understand that. If you are not if you're making crappy money, but you're learning a ton, you're still earning money, because you're going to earn it down the road. If you're earning lots of money and not learning, you should be learning on your own time, but you're earning a big paycheck. So that's fundamentally down the road.
Yeah.
So
and having the workshop from home has, allowed me to go down that route and do those things, which, is massive for what I do.
So out of everything that you fix, and because you get to choose what you fix and work on, for the most part, I would imagine there's sometimes you probably say yes and you go, I'm fixing this because I know they have a stable of motorcycles at home, and the other 5 motorcycles I enjoy fixing, and I don't want to fix this, but I'll fix this because it means I have 6 bikes to fix. What is your favorite bike to work on?
I don't have any massive brand loyalty, so there's no one particular brand as such that I like. I've worked on so many that I've kind of got to know the niches for each one. I definitely agree with the whole, we were talking about it earlier, Triumphs. They are lovely to work on, well thought out, quite over-engineered in some manners, which is quite a nice thing. Hondas as well, I quite like a Honda. They are, again, quite well thought out for mechanical sympathy, and quite easy and nice to work on. It's more the types of jobs that I like to do rather than the yeah, it's more the type of work that I like to do rather than the specific brand that it's on. So I do I do quite a lot of like fork seals, that kind of thing. I quite enjoy that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff that I really enjoy is the electrical side of things. So wiring, I actually make quite a few wiring harnesses. I've got a little workbench just behind me here that's set up for wiring harnesses. I really enjoy that side of work. And for me at the moment, that is the section of my work that doesn't really earn me the money, but I do it because I love it and I like learning that side more than anything else. So that's my section of work which I do for myself rather than I do to earn money, basically.
So to try and contextualize that, when you say doing wiring harnesses, are you talking about like if somebody wants to build a race bike, so they bring you a bike and you
Yeah.
need to chop the harness so that it's only the bare minimum?
So all the ones I do are complete. I don't like altering harnesses. I throw them away, start complete from scratch. So behind me here is a little. It's actually an old BSA that someone has put a standalone ECU on it, put all their own switch gear on. So I'll just make a harness straight from scratch, and I enjoy that side of things. I do all the wiring diagrams, make my own wiring diagrams. Make like a rope wiring loom. So you make a model wiring loom out of rope, then you can take that over to the bench and then make the full loom on the bench with the diagram and then the rope kind of guide basically. So I really like that side of it, really enjoying it. And I feel like it's a lot of things in mechanical, the reason I think I like it so much is a lot of things in the mechanical world are right or wrong. So you fit a part, you fit it correctly, you torque it up, that's right. It's done. It's fitted right, correct. With wiring looms, there is more than one way to skin. There's more than one way to do things. You can route things differently. You can make them more efficiently. You can do different, earth routing, which has got better earth points, better earth systems. More flexible ways of building the harnesses, better coatings. It's a thing that you can get better at over time, and you can. There's different levels to it. You can wire a bike up by just connecting all the connectors, but that's not making a reliable wiring loom. Making something reliable, last long, look good, routed correctly is completely different, and that's why I really like it. I've got better at it over time. So the looms that I was making 2 years ago, probably nowhere near as good as the ones I'm making now, purely because of the fact that I've got better techniques, better tooling, better crimps, better insulation. There's definitely better ways of doing everything, and I really like that journey of getting to somewhere where something is much better than it was a few years ago. I enjoy it.
Awesome. That's awesome. I've never heard of doing. Well, I've heard of doing wiring harnesses from scratch, but I've never heard of doing it in rope first. That's
Yeah.
really cool because it means that you get the right lengths, you get the right branching, you know exactly where it's gonna run because you can you zip tie the rope the way you want it. Okay, this is how it's gonna sit, and then you can take pictures of it, how it's laying down, and
Yeah.
then when you build it, you can then you can get really creative with the section, like the section joints where you can branch out, and that's where you get a lot of wire tucking, so you can get wires, you can get them hidden in a little bit better places. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
And so about a month ago or so, I wired up an engineer friend of mine who builds a lot of custom motorcycles. I do all of his wiring looms for his custom motorbikes, but he has just made or just finished a Model T Ford with a V8 engine in it, and I went and
Oh
wired that up a
my.
few weeks. I went and wired it up a few weeks ago, and obviously I can't get that over here in my workshop. So I went out to his workshop, made the rope loom while I was at his, and then obviously did the wiring diagram while I was there. Came back, made the loom on my workbench, and then went and plugged it in, and it worked. So
That's
yeah, it's
awesome.
so that was something totally different and awesome. It was so cool, yeah. And I just really enjoy making things like that. Really cool project to be involved with.
Awesome. That I'm trying to fathom a V8 in a model like that's
So
a
yeah, it was like a 1950s. I'll be honest with you, it's not my kind of thing, so I don't even know what it was. It was like a small block V8, I think,
mhm.
1950s, something that kind of era. Yeah, in a there might be a picture of it on my social media somewhere.
I'll have to see if I can find it and link it. That'll
Yeah.
do. That'll do. Oh, so okay. So I have a personal question now. I
Okay.
am I am transitioning to my second bike, sort of. Mm-hmm. It's kind of my first bike, kind of my second bike, because I bought an SV650. I've got a 99 SV650 that I bought broken. And unfortunately...
99?
99.
That's what my race bike is.
Yep, I know. So, I know. So I bought this bike, and it's had approximately 10 different owners since 99.
Yep.
When I bought it, it was supposed to be, if I get the nomenclature right, it's supposed to be a K, not an N, meaning it was supposed to be bars and not clip-ons for those who need to look it up, and you can Google what bars versus clip-ons is. Because it has clip-ons. It's supposed to have bars, but it has clip-ons. It had no front fairing. It had an aftermarket dash. It had spackle rainbow-colored paint, and at some stage I might send you the picture of what it looked like when it came home. It was ugly as sin, and it still looks ugly as sin.
I can envisage.
But I bought it broken because I bought it for $1,000 Canadian, which is like $600, 600 quid, give or take.
Yep.
And this is my first bike. I'm going to tear it down. I'm going to learn about it. I'm going to put it back together the way I want to. I don't care if things are broken because I'm going to put new things on, so on and so forth. And then life got very, very, very busy. So when I brought it home, I tootled around my driveway, which is quite large, once. Mm-hmm. So I've technically ridden it. So it's technically my first bike and the first thing I've ridden. But I haven't ridden it on the street. And I've only done the learner's course here back in the fall, so it's almost a year I've had my learner's license, as it were.
Yep.
So it is still broken. It is still in 100 pieces in my shop at home. And every time I take more apart to fix more, I find more broken. So I've put the headlight harness in it. I've put the main harness in it. I have tried to find switch gear. I've tried to find a new dash. I found a new dash, which is good used. I have no idea how many kilometers are on it because it had an aftermarket dash in it that was broken when I bought it.
Right.
It's had so many owners, no idea whether the kilometers are correct. And like I said, every time I fix something, I find more broken. So it hasn't run since I brought it home over a year and a half ago. So I'm on the hunt for a bike. And I've got a nice chunk of change saved up for a down payment. And I am loving all of the middleweight nakeds.
Yep.
So yesterday I literally traveled a whole lot with my son, and we went to another bike shop with a whole lot of bikes that I could swing a leg over. And I'm trying to decide between all of the middleweight nakeds, including, I thought I wanted a bobber. I got on the bobber yesterday, and it was instant discomfort. So I was really big sad. Yeah, Triumph Bonneville bobber.
Yeah, yeah.
It was instant discomfort, which made me really, really sad. So I'm left with all the middleweight naked. So KTM 890 Duke R.
Yep.
Triumph Street Triple 765 RS.
Yep.
MT09. GSX S 750.
Yeah.
Z900 Kawasaki.
Yeah.
And FZ09 if I were to go to an older model. And I think out of those ones, I'm having a hard time choosing.
So this is now, I would say, almost the biggest market there is for motorcycles. People have realised recently, sports bike, or not recently, it's kind of been a progression over the last kind of 15 years. Sports bikes, especially when you get up to 1000cc bikes, are so powerful for the road. They're almost, for most riders, terrifying is definitely the best way to justify it, and also just completely unnecessary. You don't. I struggle to find. I know a lot of my customers do, and they love it. And I struggle to see the need for a 1000cc sports bike on the road. 600s we're getting to the point where they are, enough of a bike to be on the road. 1000cc sports bikes now are just
they're
just
mental,
mind-blowingly fast. And the electronics packages that are on them that allow
I want to interrupt you for a second for someone who's listening to think about how mental this is. A Kawasaki ZH2 is a supercharged inline 4 naked bike, quote unquote naked bike. It weighs about 500 pounds and it's 320 horsepower. So for those of you who have any concept of what power to weight ratio is like, 320 horsepower. So that's more horsepower than an S3, an Audi S3. That's more horsepower than an S3, more horsepower than just about any 4-cylinder turbocharged car on the market. And it weighs 500 pounds.
Yeah.
That is the middleweight category. You go a step down from that to like a Ducati V4, I think it's a V4S, the Street Fighter, so it's handlebars, it's a naked. Yeah. It's 250 horsepower. Yeah, it's stupid.
I know, and it's unbelievable for the road. And I've been doing lots of track days and even started racing in the last few years. Even on the track, there is a very, very small percentage of people that can even use that power properly on a track, let alone on the road. So it's mind blowing that so many of them still sell, but that's another story. And that's why this middleweight naked bike has become so popular, because even the 765 Triumph, that's still 130 brake. That's still a serious bike. It doesn't weigh a lot, and you're also in a semi-comfortable position that you can do a few miles on it. And out of those bikes that you spoke about, that is the one I would go for every time, the Triumph 765.
And yeah, I think it's, to me, I put a post on LinkedIn a week or so ago, and I had the bobber on there. I did not have the street triple, and I, for at the time, before I had swung a leg on any of these, at the time it was off the list because it was more expensive. It was off the list because it was more expensive on insurance. But now that I've sat on the bobber and immediately experienced discomfort, it's gone. I had the Z900 on there as my number 2 choice because of its price point, because it's Japanese reliability, and because of its insurance.
They're a bit more of a placid bike. So if you're going to go out and do a bit more of a bit more mileage, you're going to go for a bit more, ride out with a few friends. If you want to go out and maybe ride a little bit harder, possibly do a track day, the 765 is the one. It's a bit more of an aggressive street bike, but they are just phenomenal. They sound amazing. They ride well. They've got all of all the good electrical packages you want nowadays. They're really, really good little bike.
And that's what I think I found after sitting on one yesterday. And the same thing with GSXS 750 now it's like bargain basement in terms of price if you can find one. I have not been able to find one. I've not been able to sit on one. I've not been able to see one because all of my, even the remotely close dealers don't have one. All of the ones that are for sale in the local marketplaces, Kijiji and Facebook and so on, by the time I find the ad, it's already sold. So I haven't been able to sit on one, but from what I can tell, after now sitting on the Triumph, and now here's the one that you haven't answered, and this is my caveat now. This is the 890 Duke R. I sat on the RS, and then I sat on the 890 Duke R, and the Duke R felt better. Yeah. But I'm looking at this going Triumph or KTM.
It depends what type of rider I think you are and what you enjoy about riding the bikes. The other one that I would throw in, the other bike for another one to throw into your list, is the Husqvarna 701. They do it's their Supermoto style or their Supermoto style bike. If you're somebody who likes to go out for 60, 70 mile blasts, wants a really lightweight bike, I'd recommend this 701. If you want to go do 100 plus miles and you want to be on the bike for a good few hours, it's not for you. But if you want to go out for an A-road blast, on a nice lightweight bike that you can throw around, those 701s are just fantastic. And that's a similar
Isn't that
kind
the
of thing.
same bike though?
Yeah, it's just set up slightly different.
It's just set up slightly different.
Yeah, but they're very exact, like you say, almost the same.
Because I had the opportunity, because it's the first one I've actually seen in the flesh. They had a Svartbilen 401 at GP Bikes yesterday, and it's basically a KTM Duke 390 in a slightly different skin. It's the way it's built. It looks very Tron-esque with knobby tires on the back. It's very Tron-esque the way it looks. It looks closer to a dirt bike, but it feels like a road bike. but it's got dirt bike tires on it effectively in a
It's almost
390.
that
So it's a
street
little,
scrambler. They class it.
yeah,
It's almost a street
yeah.
scrambler style. Yeah, and they're a really good little bike. I feel like after riding a 390 for a couple of months, you find lacking in power a little bit. They are definitely, yeah, and they are a little bit small. That next step up to, like you say, the 690 and such like is a really good little bike. Yeah, that's a kind of really good midweight.
And that 701. That is they when KTM phased out the 690 because they brought in the 790. The Svartbilen 701 is basically the KTM 690 in their chassis / frame setup, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I kind of figured out because I have sat on an old 690 and I didn't like how it felt between my legs.
They're quite aggressive. They're quite like pitch you forward on the bike, weight forward. They're good for like an hour and a half. You want to go out for a real quick, fast blast. But yeah, you don't want to be doing big miles on it. Yeah,
and I think that's that might be the trouble because I want to do two things. I'm going to do a truck ton of short trips. Like 5 to 15 minutes max. And then my mom is 3 hours away. Yeah. And my sister is 3 hours away. And my all of my trips to the city, if I'm going to go down and do bike meets, car meets, whatever, cars and coffee is down in the city. So it's like 2.5 hours one way.
Yeah.
I need something that's going to be comfort on the long trip as well as decent in town, as it were. So I don't think I can do the pitch for it, and that's why I also sat on a just for grins and giggles a Ducati Supermoto yesterday, just for grins and giggles, as well as the KTM Supermoto, and it's just too high. It's too much.
Yes, yeah, it can be, yeah.
At the same time, knowing that if I wanted to do some backcountry stuff as well, it would be a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, and that is the toss-up. There isn't a bike that does both as well as you get a bike that's more specific for that job. You need to find something that is right for what you're going to use it for.
And that's why as I experience power sports and motorcycles, I find that people start to grow stables, and I've been told that a stable is more than two. So you can have two bikes. If you have two bikes, you have two bikes. But if you have 3 bikes or more, you have a stable. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, you got a collection then, haven't you?
You got a nice growing collection, and I think it's a stable is 3 or more, and the collection is more than 15.
Yeah, that's that. I'd agree with that. Yeah, 15 is a bit more. Because when you've got 15, you're not riding them every year, and that's a collection. Then it's not usable bikes, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's that crossover point, I guess.
For example, where I'm working, gentleman has actually stored, I think, 8 of his bikes at the shop for majority of his life. He buys, he keeps, he collects, and he stores at this facility. Yes. And one of them he recently decided to sell. So he had a 1997 Kawasaki ZX11. Mm-hmm. It had 3 kilometers on it.
Oh, excellent!
Completely original. Now, when you have a bike that sits for 27 years without literally being ever touched, other than making sure there was air in the tires, you need to do repairs. So it required some effort to make it a running bike again.
Yeah. Every rubber seal on that bike will be perished. Carbs need rebuilding. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of an overhaul.
It was a bit of a challenge to get it back working the way it should, and 27 years on a Kawasaki is a long way to expect parts to be even remotely readily available.
Yes, yeah.
But it was interesting to see a 27-year-old bike start for the first time in 27 years, and it was an interesting bit. It was an interesting bit.
Excellent.
So Mike, I really appreciate the time.
No problem at all.
There's lots of great insight in there. Where can folks find you, see your content? If somebody happens to be in your areas, and forgive me if I get it wrong, it's Norwich, yes?
Norwich, yeah.
Norwich,
yeah. With the pronunciation.
with the English pronunciation.
Yeah.
If anybody happens to be in your area who's looking for motorcycle repair to reach out to you, how do they find you? How do they get in touch with you?
Best way to get in contact with me is obviously I've got a website, but on social media side of things, I've got a Instagram, Abel Motorworks. I upload quite a few videos to YouTube and TikTok, those kind of things as well. So you can find me across most platforms, all under the name Abel Motorworks or Mike Abel.
Awesome. And for any leaders out there that want to understand what it's like to do video MPIs, if you want to learn how to walk around a vehicle, talk about a vehicle in a way that customers are going to want to engage with and understand simply, please check out Mike's videos. They are very informative, very educational, and very easy to consume. And this is the kind of thing that I want technicians to learn how to do en masse, especially if you're doing video MPIs in the States. This is kind of Mike's work is benchmark, especially if you look at the TikTok, the Instagram stuff. They're short. They're like a minute or less.
Yeah.
When you can describe what's going on with a vehicle simply, clearly, and effectively in a minute or less, that is the ideal video MPI. So I'm willing to bet you could teach people how to do what you do on video en masse, and dealers would do quite well with it to teach technicians to do this. So please, folks, check out Mike's work, Mike's content all over. I'll make sure that it's posted. Anybody that's listening on Spotify, I'll make sure it's in the description. When I post this to YouTube, it'll be in the description. When I post this to LinkedIn, it'll be in the description, so you guys can check them out, check out the content. So
appreciate
again,
it.
Mike,
for your kind
thank you
words.
very much. You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome. Oh no, that's the end of the episode. But that's okay, because there'll be another one coming in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much, folks. I really appreciate you watching. I really hope you enjoy and subscribe. Folks, just to let you know that if you recall a couple months back that our brother Marshall Sheldon said something very creative on the show, flat rate sucks, changed my mind. We all had a good laugh. And he said, if I had that, I'd wear it. I'd wear it all the time. Well, guess what, Brother Marshall? You can. Folks, check out the link below in the description, whether you're on Spotify or on YouTube, and check out the merch store, because Flat Rate Sucks, Changed My Mind is there. Thank you very much, folks, for listening, and let's close out the show like we always do with a quote. And this one's definitely going to hit home for a few. The two most powerful warriors are patience and time. Leo Tolstoy. Remember, folks, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.